Good evening, Chodesh Tov.
Good evening, Rabbi.
Okay, so it looks like we're up to Hey, so we'll do that. So he says like this, וזה לשון הריב"ש בתשובה. Says the Rivash in the תשובה, ונראה שאם מתנה עמו על מנת שיחזירנה לו, so he says, it seems that if he would make a condition with him, meaning to say that on condition he's going to return it to him, קודם השבת, before Shabbat, אפשר לסמוך עליו בזה. So then he says you can rely on this, and give it to him. So you condition that he's going to return it before Shabbat. So this way there won't be any issues, with him using the animal on Shabbat and so forth, so on. Okay. So that's the tour. Now let's, no, actually, that's a bit Yosef. Anyway. Goes on. כתב עוד אם הזכירה והשילה על הגוי. He says furthermore that if he rented it or lent it to the goy, והתנה עמו להחזירה קודם השבת, and he stipulated he's going to return it before Shabbat, so now what about if the goy is holding it up, right? He refuses to return it, even though he agreed. Tov le'afkira beno leben asmo. As we said yesterday, it's proper to, right, good to make it ownerless by himself. Kodem Shabbat, before Shabbat. Kidei she'inatzel mitzvah deoraita, in order to be saved from the prohibition of the Torah. Great. Okay, so what else we got? So then he says, Umash katav, and that which he wrote, Sefer HaMitzvot titir le'askira be'avla'a, that in the Sefer HaMitzvot, Samag, he did allow to rent it out as long as the money is covered. In other words, it's general money for the whole week or month. The Samak, etc. So it says, the Samak, Katuv Sheyesh Batirim. It's written there that there are those who allow, by way of this, and it seems, Nivre Rabbeinu, from the words of Rabbeinu, Dafilu was Rabbeinu the tour, that even Befker, the Benu Ben Asmo, even if he makes it ownerless just by himself, Kashara, he allows this, the Sefer HaMitzvot, the Chivan Sheufka Isur Shabbat. Why? Because once the prohibition of Shabbat has been removed, by making it ownerless, Shara, then it's allowed. V'lo Chayshinan, so then we're not concerned, Behar Lero'im. So we're not concerned about people, the onlookers, what they're going to say. ומה שצריך על ידי הבלעה, so he says, that which you're required to do by way of הבלעה, אינו מטעם שביתת בהמה, it's not because of the arrest of the animal, אלא כדי שלא יראה כנוטל שכר בשבת. Rather, the reason is because he shouldn't look like he's taking wage of Shabbat. והוא הדין שצריך שלא יזכרנה בערב שבת. Same thing he says also applies, that he shouldn't rent it out on the Erev Shabbat, the eve of Shabbat. According to the ones who forbid that to do Erev Shabbat. וכן כתוב בהדיא בסמ"ק. And that's what it says also in the Samak. Okay, great. So let's move on. ומה שכתב בשם רבנו פרץ, that which he wrote in the name of Rabbeinu Peretz, ויפרש פשט הפקר, and he explains it, right, talking about time where it's only ownerless. Yeah, probably good to see this inside, but I'll just read here. It says, Ad Sofa Siman, until the end of the chapter, right, this goes on. Let's take a look at it for a second. Yeah, so the truth is we already read this, but I'll just read it one more time. It says over here like this. Katav Rabbeinu Peretz, right? It says in the Tur. It says Rabbeinu Peretz, Vifaresh Beshat Hefker, that this case can be constructed if the animal is ownerless, declared ownerless, as we said. Sheno mafkira ela beyom Shabbat. So what does that mean? He makes it ownerless on the Shabbat day, or kol zman sheoseh melacha beyom Shabbat, or all the time that he's doing the labor on Shabbat. So in other words, he's making it ownerless, but only for a limited time, only the time where it's being used by the goy. In order that somebody else should not acquire it. And even though, right, he doesn't make it totally ownerless, it's still ownerless. When you read the afilu bastam nami, so it says even if he does it like regular, like in undefined manner, dato lezeh, he share eno mafkira ela lafkia isu. His intention is just to remove the prohibition of Shabbat from it. Shvitat Shabbat. Okay, that's the end of the tour there. So we'll go back to Beit Yosef now. So it says in Beit Yosef like this: Hakol hagaot samak. It's all from there. So it says that it seems that even according to the ones who allow this, that's only if it was ownerless, right? Made ownerless with 3 people, in presence of 3 people. That works. But if it's just by himself, no, it doesn't work like that. Because if it wasn't so, then why would we be concerned that he may acquire it, somebody may acquire it, somebody else? But it says could be that the reason is because since it's known that when somebody's animal is in the hands of the goy, who mafkira b'Shabbat, he mafkirs it on Shabbat, he makes it ownerless on Shabbat. Sitamo keperusho. So meaning literally, ta'afilu mafkira beno leben atzmo, and even if he does it by himself, have hefker midoraita. From the Torah, that's called already ownerless, right? Even if you do it by yourself. The rabbi is required to have people there, but the Torah doesn't require that. Okay, so the 3 was only required from the rabbis. Why? That it should be that one should acquire it and the other one should testify to it. וכמו שפסק הרמב"ם, like Rambam says, פרק ב' מלכות נדרים, laws of vows, והראש והר"ן בסוף פרק אין בין המודר. They also said this, the Rosh and the Ran. Hilkach, so it says, therefore, ikar mechash, there is concern, shemez keba acher. Maybe somebody else will acquire it. ולכך צריך שיפרש שאינו מפקירה אלא ביום שבת. So therefore he has to specify that he's only making it ownerless for Shabbat, not any other time. So he says, since during the day of Shabbat, the goy is at that time, he's using the animal, so his authority is over it. Shei musket or sheula, because he rented it or borrowed it from him, the Jew. No, so at that time, nobody else can come and acquire it, because they see, right, that it's in the hands of the goy. So then when Shabbat goes out, it's considered like he went back and acquired it again. Why? Because he only made it ownerless for a limited time, right? Which is only Shabbat. That's it. Okay, great. Then he moves on. And even though he didn't totally make it ownerless, it's still considered to be ownerless. So what does that mean totally? That means that it's only temporary, right? Just on Shabbat. Shapir have a hefker, but it's still considered ownerless. Like it says in this parak, Katub Bagot Mordechai. So it says over here in this book, Perek Kamad Shabbat, first parak of Shabbat. B'Shem Sefer HaMitzvot. Name of this book, Sheim Amar Behema Knuya Lecha. If he said, right, that this animal is acquired to you, mutar, it's allowed. Uh-huh. So I think what he wants to say is that he told the goy, right, that the animal was yours. וכן כתב האגור, that's what it says in the האגור, ונראה לדברי האוספים בהפקר בינו לבין עצמו, so he says, it seems like, according to the ones who forbid it, when you do it by yourself, the ownerless, מפני שהרועים, because the people, the onlookers, בהנמי אסור, here also it's forbidden, he says. כתוב בכל בו, it says in this book, בשם רבנו פרץ, right, name of this rabbi, שאם יתנה, if he conditioned, שתנוח בשבת, that it should rest on Shabbat, mutar, he says it's allowed, right? We already saw another opinion which is not allowed. Because we don't trust the goy, to keep his word. That's why. So then he says it would be allowed to rent it out 3 days before Shabbat. So that's like a different opinion here, like a minority opinion. What about Mordechai? So it says in the Samag and the Shuma, Mashma she'im yodea she'agoy oseh b'melacha, it implies over there that if he knows that the goy is doing labor, asur b'chol gavna, he's not allowed to do it in either case. Doing labor with the animals. The Katav Samag she'ena goy ne'eman lomar. So Samag says, right, the goy is not believed to say shelo asab b'melacha b'Shabbat. They didn't work it on Shabbat. Pashutu. So it says that's obvious, right? We don't believe them. Okay, so that's the Bet Yosef. Hey, so let's just see Shulchan Aruch if we did this or not. I think we didn't do it yet. Yeah, I think I got to bring it up. So, chapter is Reish Nun, Reish Mem Vav. Okay. Mhm. Reish Mem Vav. Okay. So, it says Shulchan Aruch like this. Mutar le'ashir u'laskir kelav le'enu yudi. You're allowed to lend, right, or rent your utensils to the goy, even though he's doing labor on Shabbat with those utensils. That's what it says. So then he goes on. What's the reason why? Because we're not commanded to make the utensils rest on Shabbat. Only the animals, as we said. V'yesh omrim. Just give me 1 second. I think I'm in the wrong place. We did this already. This was hey. Okay, just making sure. So this is Reish Mem Vav. Yeah. So Shulchan Aruch says like this. Im Yisrael v'eno Yehudi shutafim behemela. For instance, it says, what about if the Jew and the Goy, they're partners in the animal? Mutar la'asot ba v'eno Yehudi melacha b'Shabbat. So the Goy can do labor with the animal on Shabbat. על ידי שיתנה עם האינו יהודי בתחילה כשקנו. So it says, how do you do that? As we discussed, right? You make a stipulation with the Goy when you buy the animal, that what? Yeah, you'll be using it on Shabbat. I'll be using it on Sunday, right? And the rest of the week we'll divide it up 50-50. So if he said it like that, then the Goy can use the animal on Shabbat. Because it belongs to him. Okay. And then he says, Ve'im lo itnu b'tchila asur. But if they didn't make the stipulation in the beginning, right, when they first bought the animal, it is forbidden, right, to allow the goy to use it on Shabbat. So why is that? The reason is because since it belongs to both of them, right, there's a prohibition for the Jew. right? To have it working like that. That's the situation. Okay, so so even if they make a stipulation afterwards, it's already too late. They have to do it at the outset, right? When they buy the animal. So then he says, what about if he lends the animal to the goy, right? What happens there? Right? Total, just gives him a loan. They should have the permission, right? You should have even the permission, right, to take it out as he wants. Without the permission of the Jew. So then the money's going to be accrued, right, for the rental by way of the goy, and the responsibility for the oxen is on the goy, mutar. Then it's allowed. Okay, just give me 1 second here. Okay, sorry about that. Let's go back there. So I'll continue in the Shulchan Aruch here. ויש מתירים אפילו לא יהיה רשות ביד היהודי רוסי. And some allow this, right, even if the goy doesn't have permission to sell this animal. By accruing the money on the goy במלווה as a loan. ויחזור אל היהודי ויעשה הפותיקי. And then the goy will come and make a document, like a payment document, collection document, they sell to the Jew. Or yeharhenam, so what does that mean? Turn it into a collateral, into a pledge. It's by him. As long as you don't tell him from now, and some allowed, if you warn the goy, right, not to do labor on Shabbat, as we already saw. There's Rabbi Peretz who allows that. If he does it, the responsibility will be on him. Even from unexpected, mishaps, unavoidable mishaps. V'yichtov ken be'alkol to him, and then right, what you do is you go to their court, right, and make a document, record this, make a recording. So now, if he comes to do right labor on Shabbat, Israel, it's not really considered to be the animal of the Jew. Because he already required it. I mean, the goy required it. to be required, right, to pay for the unavoidable mishaps. Okay, so says the Rama, "V'chol tzadei ha'iterim elu hilchatan ninhu v'yachol la'asot ezeh mehem shirtzeh." So says the Rama, right, all these options here that we just mentioned, he says they're all halacha. So therefore, you can avail yourself of any option that you want. They're all credible. That's what he's saying. V'afilu ima behema kula shel Yisrael. Even if the whole animal belongs to a Jew, כאילו הייתה משותפת בין יהודי. Still considered to be like he's a partner with the goy. רק שיפרסם שעשה דרך ההיתר. As long as, right, they publicize that they did it in a legal way, in a halachic way. Okay, with your permission, I'm just going to get some water. I'll be right back.
Yes, no worries.
Okay, sorry about that. So I'll read the Shulchan Aruch again. It's a little bit confusing. So I'm going to review it. So it says like this, right? Im Israel beno Yehudi shutafin bebehema. Again, right? If the goy and the Jew are partners in the animal, 50-50. Mutar la'asot b'hem ha'eno Yehudi melacha b'Shabbat. So there is a way, right, for the goy to do labor on Shabbat with that animal. So just to remind you, right, you know what the problem is here? Why is it a problem to do labor? Because since a part of the animal belongs to the Jew, he's not allowed to have his animal working on Shabbat. This is the problem. So therefore, to avoid this problem, how do? You tell the goy, right, as we said, let's divide it up, right? You take Saturday, you take Shabbat, I'll take Sunday. The rest of the week will go 50-50. So in other words, basically, on Shabbat, the animal does not belong to me. It's all yours, right? We don't have a partnership on Shabbat. So now, since the goy is the sole owner on Shabbat, he can do what he wants with it. That's the way to solve the problem. So then he goes on. But that's only, as we said, right, if he conditioned this at the outset, when they bought the animal. You know, as they bought it, they said, oh, it's going to be like this, right? Yeah, like this and this and this. Yeah, only that way. That's it, right? Your Shabbat, I'm Sunday, the rest of the week, right? All that. You got to do it like that. So now comes Shulchan Aruch and says, if they didn't do that, forbidden to do it. That's it, not allowed. Even though they conditioned it afterwards, right? It's too late already. Too late to do the condition afterwards. אף על פי שיתנו אחר כך, ואם ילווה אותו אינו יהודי בעבודה גמורה. So now, right, that's one element of the halacha. Now we have a different element, right, which is, what about if I lend the animal to the goy? שיהיה רשות בידו להוציאה אם ירצה. So in other words, it's really his, he can even sell it if he wants. It's totally his. So if that's the case, right, he can sell it, even without the permission of the Jew. And then he's going to have to pay him for that, right? How much he owes him. That will be allowed, right? So there's another option, right, that makes it allowed, which is you lend it to him, right, in a manner that it becomes his, even if he wants to sell it. That's option number 2. Now let's move on. ויש מתירים אפילו לא יהיה רשות ביד היהודי להוציא. Some even allow, in a case where the goy doesn't have permission to sell it, so I'll read this inside. What does it say here? It says like this. Aridesh is kopa damim, right? Then he's gonna make a loan for this, because it's like he's gonna have a debt. In other words, if he would sell the animal, he would have a debt on his hands because he'd have to pay the Jew, to restitute, right? To compensate him for the money that he lost there. Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, I'm beginning to understand what the language is here. So he's saying like this, right? He doesn't have permission to sell it, but what he has to do, he has to give like a guarantee, to the Jew that I'm going to pay you. So what's the solution over here? This solution is like this. He doesn't have permission to sell it, but what he can do, if he wants to use it on Shabbat, in other words, he's lending it to him, right? He doesn't have permission to sell it on the one hand, but on the other hand, right, he gives him like a guarantee. So what does that mean? That the Jew is going to give like a loan, provide a loan to the goy, and then the goy will give him some kind of a contract to collect that money. So in such a manner, how does this help you to do it this way? It helps you because it becomes like in the possession of the goy like this, the animal. So that's solution number 3. Okay. So then we have solution number 4. What is that? Oh, Yaranim. So what does that mean? He makes it into a pledge. He makes it into a pledge. So how does that help you? Because it's in the possession of the goy. And therefore it's allowed to use it. That's another solution. But but don't tell him, it's going to be from now. In other words, you're not going to acquire it now, this as a pledge. You're going to acquire it only in the case of default. So these two solutions are basically like two elements of one solution. There's two ways of doing it, right? So let me explain to you what I mean, right? There's one way, which is that the Jew is lending money to the goy, right? And the goy gives him a right, some kind of a document to collect it. That's option number 1. Or the other one is he lends him money, and the animal becomes like a pledge, a collateral. So either this or that, right? That's another way of doing this, solving this problem. Okay, good. A little bit tricky here, huh? This stuff. Okay, so now, right? Next solution, right? We're not finished yet. We're still going. So next one is some allow Rabbeinu Peretz, as we said, right? He allows that what? As long as you warn him not to do labor on Shabbat, you can do it. We don't really poskin like this opinion because we don't trust the goy, to be honest with this. But the thing is that there's like a caveat here, a little bit of a thing here, which is that not only you warn him not to do it, that's not the end of it. We're saying, right? He's going to condition that if he does it, if he does labor with it, the responsibility will be his. So what does that mean? If something happens to the animal, right, he'll have to pay for it. And then go to the court, right, and record this in the court. So therefore, now if he comes to do labor with this animal on Shabbat, that doesn't really belong to the Jew. That's the thing; it belongs to the goy. So all these solutions, right, are basically right conditioned on one factor, which is that we want this animal to the possession of the goy. That's the whole thing, right? In any of these manners that we just mentioned. So, okay, that's great. So what does the Rama say here? So he says all these right solutions that we just mentioned, right? We have like 5 of them over here. So what's the common denominator? Right? They're all halacha. You can do it either way that you want. You can rely on any of these opinions. That's what the Rama says. I'm not sure, by the way, if the Shulchan Aruch agrees with that. I think he doesn't. because the last few that he mentioned here, right, are not really halacha according to the way he structures it. Stam beyesh. Okay, whatever. Anyway, so the Ramah says like that. Afilu ima be'ema kula shel Yisrael. So he says, even if the whole animal belongs to the Jew, dino ke'elu hayta b'shutefet ben Yehudi. But the din is right that it's considered to be like that your partners with the goy. Rak she'ifarsem she'asa derech heter. But you have to, he says, publicize that you used one of these methods because otherwise people will suspect you. That's what the Ramah says. Okay, that's fascinating. Fascinating stuff. So I guess we'll go to the next chapter. We have like 10 more minutes. We can do a little bit more. Reish Mem Zayin. It could be we didn't finish everything over here. There's some things left. Just checking. I'm checking to make sure that we did. In what we did. Yeah, I think we have to do Dalid. So I'm just going to go back and do that before we go on. So let's try Dalid. It says over here, Katuv Be'agot Perek Vav. It says over there in his book, B'Shem Samak, the name is Samak. Israel Sheizkir Shvarim Lagoy. So he says a Jew who rented out oxen to a goy. Lacharosh behem, to plow with them. Vechoresh behem b'Shabbat, and he's using it on Shabbat. Oh, ze shalu Rashi. They asked this question to Rashi. Veyesh shayu matirim. Ima goy kibel alav achrayut. So says Rashi apparently, some allow, right, if the goy accepted responsibility for this. Mitau gzela, for what? Even if it dies, right, or if it's stolen, gneva, or right, viukra, vizula, and also the price going up and down, fluctuation of the price. Ki ata hem alav nichset son barzel. So he says, because now it's considered to be like his own property, kind of. So he says, some forbid this. Can, nevertheless, he says, since the goy cannot sell it, if he wants to, so therefore it's called the animal of the Jew. In any case, and as we said, right, the Jew is commanded about the rest of his animal. והביאו סמ"ג בתרומת סימן קמ"ח. So it says, these rabbis brought it down, this Rashi, דין ישראל וגוי שהם שותפים בהם, במה כתבתי בסוף סימן רמ"ה. So it says, regarding, partnerships with Goy and Jew in animals, it says, I wrote this in chapter 245, which was the chapter before. Okay, great. So what else we got here? And then he says, that's it. Okay, so let's take it to Shulchan Aruch, Daled. And then we can really move on. So it says Shulchan Aruch like this: Israel sheizkir shvarim le'eno Yehudi. Okay, so you have a Jew, right? He rented out, right, oxen to a goy, lacharosh behem, to plow with them. Vechoresh behem, and he is plowing with them. Yesh matrim im kibel alav. So what does that mean? He's plowing with them on Shabbat. He's working the animal on Shabbat. Now here's the thing, right? When you rent something to somebody, who does it really belong to, right? The one who's renting it or the one who rents it out? So apparently, right, it still belongs to the one who rents it out. It's still his property. But either way, יש מתירים אם קיבל עליו היינו יהודים אחריות מיתה וגזלה. So he says, you know what? There is a solution. Some rabbis allow you to do this kind of arrangement. So what does that mean? You rent the animal to the goy and he uses it on Shabbat. But it requires some conditions. What are the conditions? Number one, that the goy is responsible for all mishaps, right? So meaning what? If it dies, right, or it was stolen, or the price went up and down, the goy is responsible for all these things. So the Jew has no responsibility for this. The goy is responsible. So what does that really matter if he's responsible? Because if he is, that makes him like more the owner of the item, He's responsible for everything. That's one idea. Then we can say is that there's another opinion. But some say, you know what, still it belongs to the Jew. You know why? Because if the goy can't sell it if he wants this animal, it's called the animal of the Jew. Right? So bottom line is like this, right? He seems to paskin here like the second opinion. Meaning what? That he's stringent, right? So meaning to say that if you rent out an animal to a goy to use it to work the animal, he's not allowed to work that animal on Shabbat. So that means you got to object, and say, please, don't use it. Otherwise, I'm going to have to take you to the bed then, and resolve the matter. I can't deal with this kind of thing. Sometimes it may be hard for him, to resolve this matter. When you're dealing with a goy, sometimes, they're very stubborn. So what can you do, right? Do the best you can. Sometimes he won't even come to bed then, if you sue him, So he'll only come if you take him to secular court. So, then you're dealing with the laws of the goyim, and God knows what's going to happen over there if you get the results that you wanted. Bottom line, right, is that he paskins here that it's not allowed. So what do we see from there? That since the goy doesn't have permission to sell the animal, it's still called the animal of the Jew. Right? And this is the reason why it's not allowed. Because if you would have permission to sell it, then that would be much stronger already, right? It would be the animal of the goy. But we never got to that point, so therefore it still is the animal of the Jew. And this is the reason why we're stringent about this. Okay, great. I guess we'll stop here, Bez Hashem. We'll do the next one next time. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Chazak u'baruch, Laila Tov, and we'll see you tomorrow, Bez Hashem.
Thank you, Rabbi.
God bless.